There are a lot of frauds across anime and manga. Some I've seen, a lot I haven't. By fraud, I mean someone posing for a position or having status that they aren't qualified for. King, Monaka, and Hercule come to mind. Hercule is nowhere near the strongest human because of these guys, which he knows well. Beerus literally had to pose as Monaka for Goku to be convinced of his strongest in the universe status. Then King is just always at the right place at the right time, or wrong time if you ask him. Characters like these three are who I consider true frauds in the most literal sense, but like all good words, there's different applications, such as a character not living up to the hype or statements made about them, whether in guidebooks or in the series. One such person who comes to mind, and one I'm quite familiar with, is Sukuna. Although I myself have said Sukuna is a fraud when speaking with some acquaintances, I really began to wonder why I thought this way, because I think Akutami wrote Sukuna this way for a reason. With that in mind, I want to evaluate once and for all in my mind whether Sukuna is truly a fraud or not. When talking about this, I'm going to break this video down to multiple points of discussion and analysis. The first is statements I connect it to, the second is major feats, and the third is my personal interpretation and reasoning behind presented evidence. Now that these points have been established, let's get into it. In terms of statements, when comparing Gojo and Sukuna, we have the most infamous ones right at the beginning of the series. Sukuna declares he will kill Gojo first when he regains his strength, and Gojo's statement about how he would win against Sukuna at full power. Reading these statements in a vacuum is really hard to do because it's extremely doubtful either of them actually know how strong each other actually are. Gojo doesn't know anything about Sukuna except for stuff shared about his lore, such as him being the king of curses and whatnot. On the other hand, Sukuna knows a decent bit about Gojo, such as his domain expansion and limitless at this point in the story. These statements are not made to be taken as gospel or cement anything because they don't know each other's full strength or ability. If anything, they are made to hype up their inevitable clash and reinforce the immense pride they have within themselves as the strongest of their respective eras. I don't think there's any other motive here when discussing these statements because that's basically all there is to them. They're meant to build a parallel for two characters on a crash course with each other. However, there is another thing you could bring up when talking about Sukuna's statement. If the ancestors of the Gojo clan had someone who knew Hollow Purple, then Sukuna would be privy to that trump card possibly being in Satoru's arsenal. I say this because Sukuna defeated all the strongest sorcerers in his era, so I don't think it's too bold to assume he may have fought against this potential Hollow Purple user. To counter this, Sukuna never brings up the fact that he's seen someone with Gojo's technique before, so it's unlikely. However, if he did fight someone with the full extent of the limitless technique, then I'll be returning to this point a little later. All in all, that's pretty much all there is for statements that directly talk about them in any comparable fashion until later on. Now we can move on to the major feats displayed throughout the story. There isn't too much in the way of crazy feats for Sukuna or Gojo because they just beat up any and everyone who challenges them. Stats wise, you got them beating the crap out of Jogo and Sukuna fighting Mahoraga, who he basically toyed with. The biggest developments were in regards to their domain, as Gojo opens his in 0.2 seconds and Sukuna's being barrierless, meaning he has a superior domain to Gojo and would win in a domain battle as we see in their fight. This moves us comfortably along into my personal interpretation and reasoning. I believe Sukuna has a definite advantage when going into this fight thanks to Yuji and Megami's memories. Gojo likely knows about Sukuna's technique thanks to Yuji, and he has full knowledge of the 10 Shadows technique. However, it doesn't look like Gojo knew about Sukuna's barrierless domain because of his surprised expression when his is destroyed. Either way, when looking at what is shown during and before this fight, Sukuna by all accounts should just win. His domain amplification negates limitless, his domain expansion is far more refined, he can use domain expansion and domain amplification at the same time, and he can apparently mimic what other people can do after seeing it just once. It's for these reasons that Sukuna should have no problem taking down Gojo, but he just can't. I feel like the thought of Sukuna being a fraud all comes back to his declaration to kill Gojo once he regained his full strength. This full strength does not encompass 10 shadows, so when he said that he could kill Gojo, he just couldn't. Not to mention his power now is even greater than when he said this, thanks to his fingers getting passively stronger. Compare this to Gojo, who goes through some unspecified special training. Whatever he did is never stated nor shown. We don't know if he improved his output, reinforcement, or if he trained his mind to get around the idea of killing Megami because of their relationship. Lord literally knows what that man did for special training. Looking at all these facts at face value, things are even worse for Sukuna because while he not only got 10 shadows and his 20 finger power up, Gojo is the same strength or vaguely stronger than he was at the beginning of the story. Compile this with all the advantages Sukuna had before and his possible knowledge of Hollow Purple, again, that's a strong possible, then you get yourself a character whose hype and strength is just nothing but leaves in the wind. So the central question becomes, why though? What is the point of giving Sukuna all these advantages just for him not to be able to win with his original kit? Taking everything into account, Sukuna with Yuji's body dies right here. So what is the narrative reason for all of this madness? For one, it teaches Sukuna the love Yorozu spoke of, the hype of the 10 shadows versus limitless technique as alluded to earlier on in the story, demonstrates the apex of sorcery, and to see the absolute limits of the strongest characters in the entire series. Those are the real reasons why this fight is going as far as it is. However, strip all that away and yeah, Sukuna could not have beaten Gojo without 10 shadows. He had hubris that can only be matched by Gojo, so it makes sense that he would declare nothing other than his own victory. Is Sukuna a fraud? Personally, I don't think so. I think his hubris just got in the way of objective thought, but why wouldn't it? He stood at the top of an era with some of the strongest sorcerers seen or unseen. We as readers thought this fight would be Sukuna's base kit versus Gojo's base kit. I think that expectation being upended is what makes Sukuna feel like such a huge fraud. For me, at the very least it did, and I guess, well, everything else I've explained in this video too. Either way, I hope you enjoyed the video, and maybe I got you to take a step back and see the forest for the trees on this topic. That's all I have for today. Thank you so much for watching, and have yourselves a damn good one. Also, please be nice in the comments, and if I missed anything, feel free to tell me. I'll see you guys next time.